Tandem Radio. This is your host, Glenn DeLake, on the Good News on Business. And we have our guest in the studio today, Mark Dammeyer, who is the Director of Key Accounts and Brand Management at Somfy, which is a large corporate company that has is in over 60 countries and 7,000 employees. And we're talking today about corporate decision making. Mark, thanks again for being here this morning.
My pleasure.
The scriptures for today again are Psalm 119:66. Teach me knowledge and good judgment, for I trust your commands. And John 8:16. But if I do judge, my decisions are true because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. So important to include God in your decision-making process. That's what jumped out at me about that scripture. So, Mark, we're talking about corporate decision-making today and how that may vary and certainly how it flows. Let's talk about negotiations. When it comes time for big companies to negotiate, or maybe we'll talk to two steps. Big companies who negotiate and then big companies negotiate with small companies. Is there a difference, first off?
Well, it can be. I think the big company relationship with a small company always adds that extra dynamic of power into the equation.
The whale and the minnow, right?
Exactly. Whereas when there's two large corporations, there's always a little bit of tension about that power and who has it at any given time. And it's an important part of where the negotiation leads you.
Right. Well, with that said, what are the negotiations like at the higher level in a corporate environment? When you have another, let's say, challenge management. You know, when you have something that's just gone wrong on the other side of the fence, how does that play out in a corporate venue?
Well, there are several things to consider, I think. And first of all, you have to consider what goes into a good decision. I had to chuckle a little bit ago when you talked about the entrepreneurial environment that you're involved in and how you tend to make those decisions pretty quickly. One of the biggest basic mistakes that the researchers will tell you that if the same person initiates and approves a decision, you're most likely to get the worst results. One of the biggest mistakes that people make. Another is making decisions without a strategic planning process in place, because obviously people don't understand the bigger picture and how their decision might apply. But to get good results, there has to be clarity about who's responsible for implementing, preferably having that implementer involved in the decision, and then having decision makers that are chosen based on their skills and experience, and having the criteria being transparent. All of those things contribute to good, solid decision making. When you've got two large companies in the mix, sometimes it's hard to make sure all those things are working in tandem and that the different levels of influencers are all addressed.
Do you find that when you bring two giants together, let's say, and let's consider Somfy a giant in that respect, do you see that there's a big corporate culture gap, or are they on the same page quite often because they're both in the same kind of arena size-wise?
I've certainly experienced both. If there is a significant cultural gap, then those things can really make it difficult to look at the decision-making process in the same way. Conversely, if the corporate cultures have some similarities, you can make some very solid personal connections that allow the decision-making and the negotiation to flow much more smoothly.
Now, as an American with a company that is in 60 foreign countries, you represent 160, let's say, of the countries they're in. Does that hinder you at all, or do you find that America may have a more global approach and maybe even a better understanding of all the variety?
Well, Americans stereotypically are admired around the world, but also they have an oversized view of themselves, is what the perspective tends to be. So while people admire the American culture, they also see Americans as being a bit Wild West in their approach, if you will.
Cowboys, huh?
There you go.
Is that the term you're looking for? Well, hopefully that, I won't go there. I was going to make a political comment, but we'll stay out of that. Has management changed a lot in the last 10 years from a corporate perspective?
I think the biggest impact has been What we've all experienced is the recession in recent years. That has changed people's perspectives. I know it has mine, where things that we think we understood very well changed completely when people viewed their security or lack of security in a whole new light and were really pressed in ways that our society has never been pressed like before.
And do you think our recession, I mean, I know there's a global recession, but do you think our recession has greatly impacted those other 59 countries that you do business with?
Well, it's certainly a connected society, and all of them are interconnected from a economic standpoint. But I think the biggest difference that I see is that Americans hadn't been directly impacted at a personal level by previous recessions that we saw. This recession really seemed to hit us all very personally, whereas most other countries have been through ups and downs and cycles that they feel like they've experienced it before, and this is just one more recession, not so much of a crisis as most of us have experienced it.
Very interesting. Mark, I want to talk about leadership for a minute, because obviously that's part of decision making. I tend to believe that certain leadership skills overlay well, whether it's small business, mid-sized business, or large business, and certainly you have a lot of experience in leadership in corporate. Because of our specific audience, let's talk about how the leadership skills you've learned or that you apply in corporate America apply to your church life, because I know you're very active in church and have been in the past in leadership and so forth. So how do you see that applying?
Well, I think most of us recognize that power comes from several specific sources. You have legitimate power that comes from your title or your position in that hierarchy, expert power that comes based on your specific knowledge or expertise, referent power based on the influence of your personal relationships, and then coercive and reward power based on your ability to influence both rewards and punishment. Those powers, however, while important to keep an eye on, impact things very differently in the church, because all those power issues that most people deal with every day in their work life kind of go by the wayside in a faith-based community. And what happens is the real power should be coming from he or she that is closest to God and listening to Him most directly. Oftentimes that's not related to the usual scopes of power that we see in play.
So there is, even though as corporate people or even as a business owner in my case, we walk into the church world, we can't always apply all those skills, or I should say perspectives, as you just mentioned. Those are some great perspectives to church life.
Certainly, if a church claims to be a community of faith, which I hope it doesn't reach decisions simply on the basis of good management policy or the analysis of market trends or efficiency or even ideological consistency, but in response to God's activity and what He's pressing us to do.
I'm going to ask you a question that I often ask potential employees, and what would you say is the best thing you've gained from working in corporate America, and then what do you see as your greatest struggle? I'm going to ask two questions in one there. So let's start with, what do you feel that you've gained the most by working in corporate America?
Well, the answer may be the same thing to both of your questions, actually, because I think what I gain the most is the interaction with all the different cultures, and whether it's gender differences or cultural differences from people being from around the world, or all the different experiences that they bring into play. And that's so enriching, and you take so much away from it if you want to. It can also be the most challenging, because obviously when we're very different from each other, it can be hard to come together on the facts before us.
Well, Mark, the time flew again, and we're almost at the end of the show. So I want to ask you one very important question, and I know you probably have a strong answer for this. How has your faith impacted your business life? I mean, some people, obviously, they walk into the office and they hang their faith at the door, but some people take it with them, and I know you're a guy who takes it with you. So how does your faith impact your business?
I think most importantly, it's in coming back to that core position of, I hate to be cliche, but what would Jesus do? And being able to look at every decision as linked to a faith-based decision. That's not easy to do sometimes, and maybe we can't always be overt about it, but if we focus on that, it can sure bring a peace about what the right thing to do is.
Excellent. A couple of tips I'll just throw in there too, and I'm sure you would agree they apply it whether small business like me or large business like you. That pray often, bring decisions to God before you pull the trigger, and also ask the Lord to guide your steps. So many times, David, who is said to have a man after God's own heart, God said that himself. He brought everything to the Lord, even his sins and his accomplishments, and either praised or begged or queried or whatever. But I think the reason why David was so important to God and in God's scheme of things was because he just always went to God no matter what. So as business people out there, I can't encourage you more. Spend more time in prayer, reach out to the Lord, include him in on everything you do. Mark, thank you so much for being here today.
It was good to be here.
Well, I know we'll have you back in the future, and we'll continue to have more fun on the shows and hopefully get some good nuggets out to people out there who are searching. You're listening to Tandem Radio. Don't forget to hang in there. We're on for another hour today with Cooper Ford, who has three hosts, Dr. James Prudian and Frank Congelosi and Steve Vorius, who have some great information about business. We're here every week at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Bridge FM radio stations and at www.tandemradio.com. That's tandemradio.com. Or you can find us on Facebook. Just go on your Facebook, type in Tandem Radio, and we'll come up. And we'd like to hear from you. Like us, of course, and also send us a message. We'd love to see your pictures. We'd love to hear from you. And we'd love to know where you want us to go next or what you'd like to see. So feel free to email us at info@tandemradio.com. That's info@tandemradio.com. God bless you. Stay safe. Keep the Lord in every aspect of your life, and you'll never regret it. Be well, be successful in business, and we'll see you right here next Saturday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Bridge FM.